The Minnesota Timberwolves were the best defense in the NBA this season, but coming into their first round matchup against the Phoenix Suns, there was a ton of speculation about how the Suns could be a nightmare matchup for them. But it turns out the Timberwolves were a nightmare matchup for the Suns, which led to a 4-0 series sweep where the Timberwolves made it clear that their defense can be just as much of a nightmare to try and score against in the playoffs as they were during the regular season. So in this video, we're going to take a look at everything throughout the series that the Timberwolves did to not just beat the Suns, but sweep the whole series. If you guys enjoy this video and you want to see more stuff like this, be sure to subscribe. Let's get into it. Now, the big story for Minnesota is obviously their defense. That's been their calling card throughout the entire season. And we oftentimes saw Anthony Edwards matched up against Bradley Beal, and he executed the Timberwolves game plan to perfection with that emphasis of forcing the Suns to be a driving team instead of a jump shooting team. And this really allowed them to leverage their length and physicality to force guys to shoot that don't normally have to be perimeter shooters like Nurkic does here. The Timberwolves made life even more difficult for Beal and Durant, allowing Nickeil Alexander-Walker to get matched up with KD, and we all know that Nickeil is one of the best wing defenders in the league at this point. He generally just seemed to have a really good understanding of Kevin Durant's tendencies, where he was going to try and go, what spots he was going to try and get to, and when he was going to be looking to shoot. And he was able to disrupt a lot of Durant's process as a result. One of the standout pieces of this entire series was Jaden McDaniels, and of course, we all know what he's capable of doing defensively, but I think he showed a ton of offensive prowess in this series. He had some really nice moments where he would flash some of that mid-range stuff that we've seen him do over the years, and it was even more fun to watch when it was happening against Kevin Durant.
You know, they got KD, but we got Jaden McDaniels.
But really, a lot of his major contributions on the offensive end came when he was acting as an off-ball cutter, punishing some of the Suns' lazy defense when they would get caught sleeping and ball watching. When matched up against Devin Booker, he would take advantage of the fact that Booker isn't a high-volume three-point shooter coming off of screens, and he would actually get behind him to make sure that he was forcing him into that drop coverage against Gobert. And even when Nurkic was using these screens to create lanes for Booker, there's just no escaping the length of Jaden McDaniels. McDaniels forced Booker to be a driver so that they could get the full advantage of Rudy Gobert's interior defense, and when Booker would dump it off to Nurkic and not relocate, Gobert and McDaniels had a significantly easier time defending him around the rim. Even when having to guard Booker in transition, McDaniels' length made it incredibly tough for him to try and score in one-on-one situations. Throughout the series, we'd see him defend Kevin Durant more and more, and one of the ways that we've seen teams have a ton of success defending Durant in the past is by using a lot of physicality. So McDaniels did a really good job of making Durant uncomfortable and trying to disrupt his rhythm as much as possible when he'd be trying to work his way to his spots. Bradley Beal is one of the only consistent drivers for Phoenix, but whenever McDaniels was on him, McDaniels would play some absolutely suffocating defense and almost guarantee that Beal would either have to pass out and reset or simply just put up a bad shot. Booker really struggled to create a ton of separation when being guarded by Jaden McDaniels due to that physicality that McDaniels plays with, as well as the fact that McDaniels can stay glued to you and completely disrupt your process for getting to your spots. In the 20 minutes and 25 seconds that McDaniels matched up against Devin Booker in this series, Booker shot 4 of 12 from the field and only scored 18 total points against him. Essentially taking Booker out of the offense entirely when McDaniels was guarding him was a crucial part of Minnesota's defensive success. Now let's pivot over to a little bit of what he was doing offensively. This Horns flare that the Timberwolves ran made some use of Phoenix's poor defensive communication, having Cat set this initial ball screen before getting the flare from McDaniels, and you can see Booker show a little bit to keep Cat from driving, but Grayson keeps fighting over the screen to stay on Cat without switching onto McDaniels, and it allows McDaniels to go right up the middle of the defense to get the ball heading downhill for the finish in the and one. He was a nightmare attacking off the catch, getting by Kevin Durant and waiting for Eubanks to go up thinking that he'd try to shoot a layup, and instead dribbling to the opposite side of the basket and getting up for the turnaround jumper. Far too often would the Suns have defensive breakdowns that allowed McDaniels to just stroll his way to the basket with absolutely zero resistance. Minnesota's half-court offense was also really strong, mixing in sets like these twirl actions, which involved McDaniels cutting between these two screens as kind of a decoy so that Naz Reid can get the second screen and curl off of it to attack the basket against a slower-footed Drew Eubanks. Pivoting over to Minnesota's half-court defense, the Suns set up for the stack pick and roll with Nurkic setting the ball screen and Booker waiting to screen on Gobert or pop out to the perimeter, but Anthony Edwards does a great job of preventing Beal from creating a more direct driving angle, giving Gobert time to meet him down there, to swarm Beal at the rim and force him to kick it out to Nurkic and make the Suns reset. Even though Nurkic gets the ball to KD in space on the backdoor cut, he still has the task of meeting Gobert down there and trying to finish over him. And we know that that's a lot easier said than done. When talking about Minnesota's half-court defense, you have to talk about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He was one of the standout performers for the Timberwolves throughout the entire season, and we got to see a ton of that in this series. When the Suns would try to run handoffs for Beal, Alexander-Walker did a really good job of denying any cuts up the middle, and then when Beal goes to get this handoff, he's going to jump between Nurkic and Beal and get his hand on the ball to poke it loose so that he can get out and run in transition. Nurkic has the ball up top here, and they're going to try and set up to feed Kevin Durant in the post, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker does a great job of fronting him, and even when Durant looks like he's going to get the steal, Nickeil jumps the pass and gets a hand on it to force the turnover. One of the defensive tactics that we saw the Suns use throughout this series was doubling Anthony Edwards, because it was clear they wanted to force him to have to make quick decisions by throwing multiple bodies at him, specifically icing him towards the sideline here. But when Ant was able to make the right reads against these coverages, it resulted in plenty of open looks for the guys or the Timberwolves getting the Suns in rotation. It allows Nickeil Alexander-Walker to attack the gap here, and it keeps the Phoenix defense collapsed, leading to an open shot for Naz Reid on the wing. Now, these doubles could be negated with some clever off-ball movement. For one, Nickeil could pop out to the wing and get Beal hesitant to really commit to the double team. And two, watch Conley cut baseline to pull Eric Gordon away from the strong side corner, creating a driving lane for Ant to get to the basket, and he gets the reverse layup to fall against Durant. For years, we've heard all of the discussion around Rudy Gobert and whether or not he's a complete and utter liability defensively whenever he's forced to step out and guard the perimeter, but that wasn't a problem for him at all against the Suns for a couple of reasons. One, we're talking about Rudy Gobert having to step out and guard guys like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. These are two guys who definitely fall into the category of players where it doesn't really matter a ton who you have guarding them, because they're good enough of scorers that they're going to be able to pretty much get whatever they want. Two, the Timberwolves were fine with Rudy having to step out a little bit and guard the perimeter because they had other guys on the floor that were capable of covering for Rudy when he'd have to step up. Guys like Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they could all operate in a help side role in the paint, and Anthony Edwards could provide digs and help shut down guys trying to get by Rudy. We've never seen him operate with this much defensive talent surrounding him, and it turns out if you surround one of the best defenders ever with a bunch of other great defenders, you're going to be pretty hard to score against. And even occasionally in isolation, Rudy would have a possession or two where he'd catch Kevin Durant off guard and be able to force him into a turnover. The Suns would pull him out to the perimeter on Nurkic and run these wide pin downs for KD, where KD comes and gets the handoff. And the Timberwolves defense is so good that Rudy can afford to temporarily stay on KD while McDaniels navigates the action, while Conley shows for a second on Nurkic before closing out to Beal. And by the time the Suns finally look to pass to Nurkic on the roll, Rudy just has too much time to recover out to him in the paint. Top to bottom, the Timberwolves are able to scramble and rotate better than any other team in the NBA. Towns gets Gordon to give it up here, and then Booker is going to feed Durant down low with the mismatch. To help prevent Durant from punishing the mismatch, Cat is going to go down to double him, which triggers the rotation from Nickeil onto Gordon, with McDaniels covering for him onto Booker, and Ant to O'Neal, Conley to Bradley Beal. And when Beal gets by Conley, Cat's going to come over to prevent a shot at the rim, and Nickeil jumps the pass along the baseline to nab the steal and shut down the possession. Now, all of this stuff that I've covered in this video is great, but it's impossible for me to not just go ahead and give Anthony Edwards all the credit in the world for his performance. He averaged 31 points, 8 rebounds, 6.3 assists, and 2 steals over the course of this series. He had a ridiculous 64.8% true shooting percentage. He shot 43.8% from 3 on 8 attempts a game. He put up just some absolutely ridiculous numbers while also playing terrific defense throughout the entire series. The Denver Nuggets are their next matchup, and they're of course going to be a formidable opponent heading into the conference semifinals, but this team is firing on all cylinders at the exact right time. And if they can keep pushing all the right buttons as we get deeper and deeper into the postseason, there's no telling what they can do. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like this, be sure to subscribe and leave a like. That's the easiest way to support me and help me continue making content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.